Hello and welcome to the third game in the best of 15 series between ZLO and ThomasHiatt. ZLO is on the top side with green UEF, and Thomas on the bottom side with gray Cybrin. And this game was played on Roanoke Abyss. This map quite popular between one-on-one players. As you can see, it looks a little different from the traditional map. The starting location is pretty small for both players. Definitely a transport rush map. We see that these expansions are quite a ways away from the main island, so need a quick way to get over there. Of course, you don't always have to make a transport first. You can build a scout first and try to intercept your opponent's transport. But usually on this map, because the starting locations are so far apart from each other, players can get away with building a transport first and sneaking off to one of these side expansions even before their opponent's scout arrives. Now that might depend on the exact build order here. Looks like ZLO is going to go for what looks like 8 P-gens before the air factory. Now that's indicative of a first interceptor. Well, technically scout first, then interceptor. And ThomasHiatt looks to be doing a more conservative 10 P-gen air factory build. Likely going to build a transport first. Now you can build a transport with just 8 P-gens, but you can expect to have some energy deficiency later on. It's not long, it's not substantial that you'll be power stalling, but it probably will happen. So you got to plan ahead for that. But it will give you a quicker transport. Now, ThomasHiatt does have the build order advantage here if both players decide to go with transports, because they're both going to have transport out roughly at the same time. But Thomas will have more power. We see that ZLO is not going to go for a transport. Good idea. He's going to go for that interceptor first. Now, he doesn't build a scout, which is interesting. Usually, players will build scout first so that they can get a jump start on heading over to the opponent's base. Now, that scout would probably be here by now, and he'd get eyes on the transport so that he could put a lock on Thomas's transport here with his interceptor. But at this rate, ZLO's Inti or Thomas's transport might make it away from the island in time, and ZLO will not be able to get a lock. Let's take a look at the visibility here. ZLO not able to see the transport, and he has to do some guesswork. So he sends one interceptor here to each island where he suspects ThomasHiatt's transport might be heading, so that he can meet it. And it does look like he'll meet it at exactly this location, but the interceptor did not switch its target to that transport, so did not detect that transport. That means that Thomas will be able to drop these islands first. But ZLO does have a follow-up to that move. He does have a bomber, but it's going in the wrong direction. So not the best start for ZLO here. This is not going the way he would have hoped. But there's still an opportunity to delay Thomas's expansions. Thomas did decide to send the second half of his NG over to ZLO side, and this is actually easier to defend for ZLO. As long as Thomas does not have this island for too long, because this island is so close to ZLO's base and ZLO has excellent air coverage, Thomas will have a heck of a time building up a base here. ZLO's ACU now headed to this island, but it's not the ACU that's going to delay this expansion, it's this bomber. ZLO's bomber failing to drop, but no air coverage from Thomas means that this bomber will be able to take out Thomas's NGs, but not before the factory finishes. Thomas does manage to finish that factory. Meanwhile, ZLO is able to drop his NGs over here on the top right island, and he's also going to drop the rest of those NGs off at this bottom right side island of Thomas. Normally the players will play conservatively and try to maintain their half, the bottom player taking this bottom half of the map and the top player taking this top half, of course, but occasionally they'll try to steal their opponent's island. And it's not always the best move because it's risky, like this will happen, and Thomas, of course, spending a lot of resources on this land factory. Very inefficient use if one bomber can just prevent it from building anything. And now this is going to get pretty ugly pretty fast as the presence on their islands here ZLO is very close to this island with his main base, and this island expansion of ZLO very close to Thomas's main base, so lots of action going to happen throughout this game if both players succeed in expanding to their opponent's side. But it doesn't seem that that's going to happen. Actually, Thomas, it looks like he's going to recover his island on his side, and ZLO probably going to recover his island on the top left. Now, Thomas does have frigates already headed up towards ZLO's base, and that's going to be a pretty dangerous for ZLO's nexus over here surrounding the island. And in fact, his naval shipyards might be in danger. And ZLO still doesn't have much of a frigate presence, so Thomas has the initiative with Navy, so ZLO has to be careful. But right now ZLO does have the air lead, and he's not in too much danger as long as he gets to Tech 2 air and starts building torp bombers to take care of the frigate spam initially. In terms of economy, both players roughly even, although ZLO did build a Tech 2 mechs already. He's working on his second. And ThomasHiatt working on his second Tech 2 mechs as well. He just finished his first one. We can see that Thomas's ACU remaining on his main island, though potentially could have done more if he had tried to expand with it. He could already be building here on the right side. But of course, sending your ACU to your side expansion a little bit risky, as those expansions are a little more exposed to naval assault. ZLO's Air Force dominating the skies. Thomas really has no Air Force to speak of. Right now, Thomas is quite vulnerable to pretty much any air maneuver from ZLO. So ZLO is building bombers now. And it looks like he has a few queued up actually, so these bombers may be pretty annoying for Thomas, especially in these smaller islands. Each small island has one mechs on it, and even though it's just one mechs per small island, there's this number of small islands on this map. Nothing to scoff at. We can see there's quite a few dispersed throughout the map, so As long as ZLO gets coverage with just one bomber for each island, that's going to deprive Thomas of some pretty crucial mass income. Lots of bombers being produced from ZLO, actually. So, going to get pretty annoying for Thomas coming up pretty soon. Already one mix targeted by that bomber, and it's going to go down after the second pass. And looks like Thomas's frigates have been entirely taken care of. Some of that reclaim going to ZLO's coffers. And frigate spam from ZLO now, heading down south. So looks like Thomas wasn't able to really maintain his frigate count. And now it's ZLO that's being aggressive here. In terms of mass income, Thomas does have 2,000, 3,000 more mass collected. He could be, yes, he appears to have spent it, a lot of it in ecoing too. He has about 10 mass protect more than ZLO. So what is Thomas's next move? Is he going to tech up? Is he going to keep, is he going to build more Tech 2 mixes? I think that's a given on this map. But currently, it doesn't seem like any tech upgrades. ZLO does have a Tech 2 air factory already, and Thomas should get right on that. It's already 11 minutes in, going on 12, and Thomas doesn't have any Tech 2 tech. ZLO working on his Tech 2 PGen. Take a look at this map. Those bombers wreaking havoc on Thomas's small islands here. Every small island occupied by a bomber. And even if Thomas is upgrading mixes, he's losing a lot of income just from being unable to protect his islands from these bombers. So ZLO catching up in mass income. And ZLO isn't stopping upgrading his Tech 2 mixes either, so now he's already overtaken Thomas. And with so much frigate presence on the map from ZLO, boy, Thomas is gonna really have to, he's gonna have to make a move here. But the problem is, no tech from Thomas. He's gonna spam frigates. He has more naval factories queued up. And it's a bit late to spam frigates now, as ZLO is headed to Tech 2. Well on his way to Tech 2 air. So he's poised to defend against any frigates that... Okay, so Thomas is gonna stop spamming frigates or spamming naval factories, but he isn't upgrading any naval factories at the moment. He does have a Tech 2 air factory now. I don't know how long he's had it, maybe even longer than I thought. But here's a small dogfight over here, actually the most substantial one we've seen thus far, and ZLO wins it. ZLO has had air control for a while, and now there's no question that he had more interceptors, if that was ever in doubt. And ZLO continuing to eco, as really he's pretty safe. He's got a lot of the map covered. He can sit back, relax, and just click upgrade on his Tech 2 mixes, as he's pretty much ready to take on any aggression from Thomas. So what's Thomas working on right now? Well, he has to recover his interceptors, so he's working on that. Building more interceptors, but his naval coverage is a little bit behind here. Not really taking away any mixes from ZLO. We can see that most of his frigate incursions into ZLO's territory have been wiped clean. ZLO doing a pretty efficient job of that, covering all of his islands with frigates. And in fact, it's really Thomas that has to rebuild his mexes on the perimeter. ZLO being pretty effective with the raiding. And now torp bombers are out for ZLO. We can see that, well, Thomas, with so few frigates on ZLO's side, very concerning. But ZLO with already frigates on Thomas, both of Thomas's expansions, keeping Thomas occupied while he just continues to upgrade mexes. And now the mass income differential reaches roughly 20, almost 20 in mass per tick. Now ZLO does have a Tech 2 naval factory up, and that's going to just transition into destroyers hitting these expansions. So right now, Thomas really has to recover his naval tech and catch up to ZLO. Thomas is working on Tech 2 mexes though, pretty diligently. He just has to be slightly faster. A big group of frigates from Thomas headed straight to ZLO's base, but ZLO seems to be responding. A lot of these side frigates from the outlying islands are headed back to the main base of ZLO. And with these torp bombers being added to the mix, ZLO not having too much trouble repelling this small task force of frigates. ZLO is offering Thomas a little bit of reclaim here and there, but this reclaim is a little bit harder to recover than what you would see in most land maps. Engineers have to walk quite a distance to get just a few frigate wrecks, and the distance between the frigate wrecks are so large that it takes a long time for the NGs to recover those wrecks. So ZLO not losing too much, not giving Thomas too much by raiding, but Thomas has just been spamming frigates this whole time, and now we can see the manifestation of that here. So many frigates accumulated, and ZLO lagging a little bit behind in frigate production. And look, Thomas actually retakes the lead in mass income. Thomas has been busy this whole time, and just like that, he comes back in eco. So he's been upgrading. I just haven't been. I guess I just haven't seen that he was upgrading at that time. And all of a sudden, Thomas jumps ahead, 103 mass per tick, and now ZLO's left base under some fire. Of course, frigates not able to reach the middle parts of these bigger islands, so they can really only raid these corner mexes. Not really efficient to do that with such a big force and losing all these frigates just to get a few mexes. The problem remains, though, that Thomas is facing here. These torp bombers. There are so many torp bombers now. Alright, I lied. There's not so many, but there's a decent number. There's a small group of torp bombers. I'm sorry. It's more of a small group. But I'm seeing the potential. I'm seeing what ZLO could be doing coming soon in a little bit. But Thomas here with a nice group of Vinties on the top left part of the map here. So he might be able to defend against torps. Maybe. Let's see here. Thomas now working on his Tech 2 Navy. Might be a little late for that. but he has used his frigate spam as a decent buffer, delaying ZLO's push with this Tech 2 Navy. But really, frigates alone can't really survive against the brute force of UEF destroyers. So looks like the left side is about to collapse. And Thomas is Tech 2 Navy a little bit late, so even before his Navy is able to arrive, I think ZLO is going to be able to wipe out this entire expansion. Oh man, that's trouble. That spells trouble for this bottom left expansion. 2 destroyers here. 2 destroyers, and it's only going to be a matter of seconds before this entire base gets wiped out. A small group of frigates here on the top right being repelled by torp bombers and a destroyer. But these torp bombers not well defended, so I think Thomas might be able to take care of these, or not. There's just not enough interceptors here. Look at that. They're going to be taken out by ZLO's sortied interceptors right now. And here comes ZLO. Oh, it just took a little bit too long for Thomas to build his Tech 2 Navy. And now ZLO is coming around, and well, he can just retreat with this group now. Thomas does have a substantial defense for his main base, but the problem is he's going to lose this bottom left island. And eventually, that's going to become, that's going to make a difference in the naval sizes. A lot of ZLO's Navy over here at the top right defending, and once they rendezvous with his Navy down here, they're gonna combine and form a force so powerful that ThomasHiatt might have to throw in the towel here. But Thomas shouldn't give up yet, and he won't. He's doing a pretty good job of pushing ZLO's Navy back here on the bottom left side. He has torp bombers, and ZLO doesn't really have any anti-air on this side. So just 3 torp bombers doing some playing defense. Thomas's Navy following closely behind, but look, ZLO is sending a large portion of his air force now over to take care of these torp bombers. ZLO's income now at 113, Thomas at 93. And you can see that Thomas doesn't seem to be in a position where he can do much damage to ZLO, because take a look at what units he has. And ZLO just has more units. Thomas has 2 destroyers over here on the left side, but ZLO is bringing around a destroyer, and he has torp bombers. So Thomas will have a hard time pushing out with this group and even defending his island. And on the bottom right side, there's 5 destroyers, and they're coming completely unopposed by Thomas. That means the bottom right corner is gonna fold as well pretty soon here. But ZLO delaying the push just a little bit. He's gonna maybe bolster his Navy before marching in. I think he just wants to play a little bit more safely. He doesn't want to lose his destroyers. But in fact, he could probably make a single pass around this island and retreat after that. As there are 4 Tech 2 mexes, he could just wipe them out and retreat. And Thomas now pushing up with this left navy, but they're going to be met with fierce resistance from torp bombers, and I think that destroyer is already toast. Oh man, Thomas realizes the difficulty of the situation here. He throws in the towel, and yeah, the scores aren't very different here. Thomas was doing a really good job of keeping up with Eco, but it was just the positioning on the map control that ZLO had, and he just had the right units in the right places and in larger numbers. And then towards the end of the game there, ZLO had collected 10,000 more mass than Thomas, so his early lead just snowballing little by little for 25 minutes. Little by little, ZLO was able to maintain and grow his lead against ThomasHiatt. We saw that the early maneuvers from Thomas with his frigate spam didn't succeed, and that caused him to fall behind a little bit. I think if he teched up a little sooner, if he had destroyers, he would have had a little bit of an easier time doing damage to ZLO, because ZLO was well prepared for those frigates. Thomas had the eco to get to Tech 2 Navy. It just took him a little bit of a while to get there. And ZLO, having one air early on, kind of put a lot of pressure on Thomas, as Thomas was losing these small islands to bombers. So yet another reason to protect your air force, right, or maintain parity with your interceptor count with your opponent. So very well played by ZLO. Good effort by Thomas, and thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next game.